overcome drug addiction, gotten super fit, built a couple real estate businesses. This is my ego, my past self coming up being like, this is impossible.
Think about it for a second. I want a cigarette. Okay. Why?
This is really expensive. Well, compared to what?
The goal is to cross $1 million ARR.
So we just had quite the journey recently. Trying to get these set up. This is my first podcast. Is this your first live video podcast?
This is it's not my first, but it's my first with you.
Yeah. So, we were thinking for a minute maybe it would be our last.
I know, yeah.
With as much trouble as we went through.
That's exactly right.
But I think there's a reason why we went through this. Just so we could set them all up perfectly.
That's right.
I think it's going to work better than we can imagine, right?
Yeah. And we're just I think one thing is we're going to appreciate when we see videos that are done well. We're going to look at them and we're going to be like, they know what they were doing. Yeah. That is not as easy as you think.
Yeah.
But we did end up getting Coke Zero. So
we did. Should we show that? Is that against advertising rules for... I'm just going to go like this. It's delicious. Aspartame all the way. Yeah. I mean, it's 0 calories, so there's this kind of trade-off, right?
It's paleo, it's keto.
Yeah.
It's vegan, it's carnivore. It's everything, dude.
It kind of satisfies every group. It is like the most inclusive drink that you could possibly imagine. Yeah, it's like if it were political, it would be like a total, like in the middle center moderate. Well, so accepting of everything. It's kind of like the Jesus of drinks.
I would venture to say that's true.
Yeah. Definitely makes me feel highly energized and very spiritual, particularly spiritual.
Yeah.
So speaking of spirituality, I remember when I first saw your stuff online, and that was what kind of drew me to you originally, was just like the spiritual connection and kinship that I felt.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this guy's got some cool stuff to say.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious to know, like, tell me a little bit about your Twitter journey, how you got started in Twitter, and let's just chop it up, man.
Dude, chop it up.
I want to hear like the main reasons why you're in it, why you started, and while I drink my Coke Jesus here. Cheers. A sword soak.
I got into Twitter because I started on doing a web design and coding class, a free cohort. And one of the recommendations was that we started Twitter because there's a real hub of tech. Like there's tech Twitter, money Twitter, there's a bunch of them.
And what kind of a cohort was it?
It was for HTML and CSS. You might want to scoot out of the sun, but you're right.
Yeah, that's fine. All right, I got have a good tan.
All right, man, just looking out for you.
Thank you. I should see very spiritual.
There you go.
Very compassionate.
So I was learning how to code. It was HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And about halfway through it, I think on Twitter, I ran across a profile. I think it's Easlo. You know Easlo?
Easlove?
Easlo is no Notion guy. And he has a huge
Notion. Yeah. He does Notion templates. Oh, I need to get connected to this guy. This is the guy that I was literally looking online last night for a VA to build Notion templates.
Oh yeah. You'll find them.
Thank you, Jesus. Yeah. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah. Dude, you'll find there's some bangers out there, and Notion is amazing.
I love it.
It'll sing.
I know hardly anything about it other than the very basics, which like 0.01% of what it actually is capable of.
Right. Like I know it's like a Word document, right?
Oh yeah.
Anyways, I came across Islo's profile and I saw what he was doing. I was like, he's totally out here doing something different than what everybody else is doing. He's not just, connecting and posting random content and kind of just, he was there for a reason. He knew what he was doing. He had an audience. He had something that he was bringing valuable to his audience, and they expected that. There was this reciprocal relationship, and I actually really liked that model. And so I decided, I was like, well, how does one go about growing a Twitter audience? What does that even consist of, right? And so,
and this is what, about a year ago?
This was January in 22. Yeah.
Okay.
So January.
Yep. Year and a half. Okay.
Yep. And so skip forward till about July, and I decided to start my profile that I have now, which is the Garden of Words profile. And I was originally anonymous. A lot of guys are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was just sharing ideas and kind of connecting with people. And you kind of learn how to grow and how to build audience and what people resonate with and why. And also you can learn your, because there's so many levers you can pull and push.
Right. That's part of the place where people get confused.
Totally.
It's because they're like, what do I do? It's like almost like analysis paralysis.
That's exactly right. There's so many options because it's like write something engaging that'll make people better and make the world better by extension. It's like pretty tall order. Like that's a pretty tall.
What's it like me?
Right? All right, exactly. And so I found a group of people that really resonated with and was interacting with the audience, and people were engaging with what I was writing and felt like I was getting a lot of feedback about it being a positive influence in people's lives, which is really the goal.
Nice.
And so got connected with some other people, started taking writing more seriously, and then skipping the jump forward now to this year, and I'm doing ghostwriting, building an agency with a few other guys.
Okay.
Helping people to grow audiences for businesses and for entrepreneurs and stuff. And so
if anybody needs a ghostwriter,
there you go.
Yeah. Your guy right here.
Yeah.
One of the best.
There you go. And yeah, it's been really, really fascinating. The main thing that I've realized is that there are ways to connect with people that are efficient, productive, and call the best out of them. And I think the businesses that I'm most excited to work with are the ones that do that. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
And just since this is my first video podcast, especially doing it with a guest as well, let's just kind of introduce ourselves.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. You will, sir.
So I'm Brett, and I am on Twitter, Garden of Words. If you look up Garden of Words, you'll find me. And so I write about spirituality, psychology, writing, philosophy, and I enjoy the topics that really just writing about things that make me feel curious and make me feel like learning more. That's one of my main joys on Twitter, and one of the reasons why I enjoy it so much and resonate with your stuff. So
yeah, hell yeah. My name's Cole. I'm at the Colemination. Created this podcast called the Colemination Project. This is my first podcast. I've done some other videos before, but I'm not sure which camera to look into. That's okay. We're just going to be completely. That's one of my things. Is just lay it out flat, being completely honest.
Exactly.
And I like to. I'm a coach, so I'm a former realtor. I've overcome drug addiction, gotten super fit, done neurolinguistic programming, built a couple real estate businesses. Working currently on a sort of event space, like a retreat space that is in Kalama, Washington, on a river, and so that's going to be opening this summer. And yeah, I coach people on high performance, which really means figuring out how to step outside of your ruminating mental landscape, which was chewing on me earlier.
Ruminating mental landscape.
Yeah, it's the part of us that wants to either go into the future and fret and be anxious or get depressed about what we did or didn't do or what we should have said, and how to overcome that in the moment and then get very clear and get into an open state of being. Because when we're in an open state, that's when the ideas come. That's when we find ourselves in the right place at the right time. That's when we put ourselves in a position to, what everybody loves, make a lot of money and like impact people the most. And the more people you impact, generally the more money you make. So that's a huge part of what I'm about. It's deeper than that. There's strategies to it, but that's mainly what I do. So that's us in a nutshell.
That's right.
So we'll continue going into it. So you started this journey. You saw, what's his name? Easlo. Shout to Easlo.
Yeah, shout out, brother.
Yeah. So
good stuff.
That's who got you started. And where are you at with it now? And where do you see yourself going with it over the next year or two?
Yeah. So right now, what I'm doing is focusing on expanding that agency. It's ghostly.com. Check it out. Again, I'm biased, but I think it's pretty cool. It's a cool project. Working on that with my friends Taylin and Dale. And so essentially what we're doing is growing audiences and building meaningful content as a method for either for moving people towards their desired outcomes, right? So it's if that means they desire to have an audience to share their ideas with and want to see as a testing ground, like see if it really is resonating, that's a great way to do it. Also, for businesses that want to connect with real audiences and real consumers who are going to appreciate and resonate with particular content or brand, it's a really nice way to do that. And so growing that, scaling that, the goal is to cross $1 million ARR. That's our next checkpoint, which we're on track to hit probably sooner rather than later. It's hard to know because things can fluctuate so much, but that's also just part of the game,
Yeah.
right?
So for our audience members who aren't great with acronyms, that's annual recurring revenue.
Annual recurring revenue, that's right.
Awesome.
So yeah, you'll see that if you're in the Twitter sphere a little bit. MRR, monthly recurring revenue, ARR, yeah. And so scaling that, but then personally also, I have several medical patents that I'm marketing and bringing to large. It's essentially it's medical packaging, right? So it's kind of a niche within a niche, right? It's patents, but it's medical, but it's packaging specific, right? Deliverables, one-time use deliverables, and so and then also I'm a practicing occupational therapist.
Nice.
So I recently stopped.
Okay, I was gonna say you're doing all three right now.
No, just like actually a week ago.
Wow.
Tomorrow. So under a week ago was my last day, and that was actually kind of challenging. It was interesting.
Yeah, tell me stuff.
So occupational therapy is
what does that even mean?
It's very similar to physical therapy. Okay, it's a type of rehabilitation discipline in the medical field. OT is master's level. It's moving towards PhD level, similar to physical therapy. So what we do is basically we rehab people from where they're at currently to where they would like to be as far as their performance in their own life, essentially by their own measures, right?
Okay.
So, for example, if somebody has a stroke and they're having a difficult time lacing their shoes or cooking or getting around the house or things like that, we work on strategies to support their body and support their environment, right? And so it's actually something I really enjoyed too.
Yeah.
It's just with the opportunities that we had really through Twitter, it became either I was going to have to really figure out how to hire people to do the work that I'm doing on a daily basis or just need to dive in. And it took a little bit to think it through and actually do it, but it was time. It was time to dive in. So,
yeah. So when did you start initially making that transition? Or when did you know in your mind, hey, I'm going to start transitioning out of occupational therapy?
Dude, it was one of my favorite moments.
Yeah. Ooh, this is the good stuff.
It was so good.
Is it like a bolt of lightning or something? Or yeah,
kind of. It was almost like well, I had a patient that was coming to see me. And I had seen them prior, and they had an elective surgery in their hand. So I did hand specialist, was kind of my specialty. And so they had an elective surgery, and they came back, and I had seen them a while ago, and they walked in, and the first words out of their mouth were, "What are you still doing here?"
Wow,
for real.
This was out of nowhere.
This was
they hadn't like mentioned anything.
Nope, they knew. They knew some of the things I was working on. They knew kind of my entrepreneurial spirit and everything, but they just turned to me and they said, "What are you still doing here?" And I was so taken back by that because I was like, and it just rang so true, so true. Like it really threw me off. It did, because I was like, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? Because it's such a basic question, but it's like the thread of the tapestry. It just pulled, and it was like, yeah, dude, you need to think about that. You don't have an answer other than, well, this is what I do. Yeah. But like when I really thought about it, yeah.
Right. Well, and that's the beautiful thing. Like once you have those moments of realization, right? It's like you start pulling on that thread. It's a thread that can never be tightened again.
Yeah.
It's like there's kind of this beauty to your awareness or becoming aware of something, like breaking this ignorance, because once you know, you can't unknow. And it's like almost like you have to move forward. And if you don't, it's painful, right? Because you can't unknow. It's a double-edged sword. So on one hand, you don't want to be ignorant, but there's this kind of like ignorance is bliss thing. There's a reason that's a cliche. And on the other hand, it's like you want to grow, but once you start seeing what's on the other side of the door, you're like, oh, this is a mountain that I have to climb now.
Yeah, it goes back to when
you get to climb, rather.
You get to climb. Mm-hmm. We were eating lunch. We were talking about the balance of when you learn that it really is your responsibility, and how that is initially really it's a terrifying experience for people who are awake and see it. It's terrifying because you are responsible for the buck stops here, right?
Like there's fully responsible.
Yeah, and that's initially I think induces a terror response, which is probably right. If you don't feel any fear at that, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that's good. I don't know. I haven't thought about that. But
you're not acclimated to it yet.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Because when you realize on the other side of that is that it's an opportunity, that it's a gift, that you actually, what you do matters.
Yes.
Right. Peterson talks about that all the time. He's talking about what you do matters. but what you do matters, right? It's not just like this what you do matters thing. It's like Jordan actually, Jordan Peterson. It's that there is actual consequences for your decisions. And so you actually have to think about what you're doing. You can't just kind of wander around. And the analogy he uses is Peter Pan, which is that by taking the responsibility, you actually are stepping into who you ought to be as a mature adult, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. That reminds me of an Alan Watts quote.
Mhm.
And I've heard other teachers talk about this, but I think he put it beautifully, and this isn't verbatim, but it's like, if you can hold the awareness and the notion of everything matters and nothing matters simultaneously, right? It's like, because nothing matters, because you're going to die eventually, you can stop worrying. There's nothing at stake ultimately. And simultaneously, every little thing you do matters because it has a ripple effect on everything around you, on the person around you. The next person you smile at versus frown on the street, they could totally go off and I could like set them off, right? Or it could make them like feel amazing because somebody smiled at them. They're having a bad day. Just like the idea of the butterfly effect. If I take a left or a right on the street corner, it changes my whole life.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so on that, so if you can hold both of those simultaneously in your mind as that paradox, then you move it in a way that's like extremely intentional, but relaxed. And that allows for, that's a flow state.
That's the flow state.
Right? That's it. That's the flow.
It's the spiritual maturity of a person and their ability to hold paradoxes. I've heard people speak on this before, but what you get to at the heart of many things, it's like a hurricane, right? It's moving, but you get to the middle of it, and there's something very still,
right,
at the center of it. It's not moving, really. It's spiraling, but it's not moving, right?
No.
And I think at the center, it's still perfect. Yeah. At the center of most of life's really important questions is a very vibrant, disruptive paradox, right? So like that piece where it's like you're fully responsible and also you're thrust into this world completely, like,
right,
you're in the middle of the universe. You're in the middle.
That's the crazy part to think about.
Somewhere in
it. Yeah. You're a whole speck amongst billions of galaxies, amongst billions of solar systems, spinning through infinity. That's the truth of what's happening right now.
That's nuts, dude.
And this conversation is happening.
I know, yeah.
And the next thought is happening simultaneously.
Dude, sometimes your equipment breaks and then you also get a Coke Zero.
Yes. It's mind-blowing. Yeah. It reminds me of, I think I was listening to a Michael Singer podcast. He has a guest the other day. If you don't know, Michael Singer is amazing. He's one of my favorite spiritual teachers and just like performance teachers in general. 100%. But he was talking about, he's like, think about the word mind-blowing. It means it blows your mind away so much that you're awestruck. You're present for a moment, and you're finally fully here because the mind isn't in the way. It blows it away.
That's a really interesting metaphor. Yeah, I like that. It is awestruck. Like when you have those moments, those like deep ahas, it is a moment of wonder.
Yes.
Like,
yeah. It's like when you're talking about your wife, we're here in Arizona, or Sedona, Arizona, which is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. When she drove, when you guys were driving in, she got teary-eyed. So the landscape, because there's these giant red rocks everywhere that are, there's 1,000, 2,000 foot high rock faces that just are over the horizon as you come into Sedona. But it is like, it's breathtaking. Yeah.
It really is. Yeah. Some moments they hit you so hard and you don't, the funny thing is they're often, sometimes they're grand, like they're like, like this expansive, you're like, what? This is incredible. I don't even know what I'm looking at. That's how I felt. And then other times it's like somebody saying something so small and simple, but it just hits right where you're at. Right. And it just hits you. And it's like this moment of, wonder.
Correct.
Wonder is in many ways, it's like an opening to a deeper sense of beauty, I feel like. And that's what it feels like to me when I feel that sense.
Yeah. Same here. It's like, to me, it's like an expanded version of curiosity.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like you just kind of, you're in a state of allowing. But like then the wonder creeps in because you're like, wow, once my mind drops, once my judgment drops, once I'm not like trying to fix or control everything, wonders that. It's like a tradition and as a child.
Oh yeah.
Right. And he built Disneyland.
Or an REI as an adult.
Right. Exactly.
Dude.
I love that we can talk about everything. This is what I love. I just like to veil what they call chunking up in NLP and neurolinguistic programming.
Yeah.
It's like you go big view.
Yeah.
And then chunking down is like going to the micro, right? And we can talk about anything from like Twitter to like how it influences our spiritual revelation to how much money we're able to make, how much how many connections we have with it, how much fun we're having with it, how some days fucking suck.
Yeah.
Like, you ever have those days on Twitter where you're just like, I don't want to write anything. I just want to delete Twitter.
Do you know what? Okay, I talked about this the other day with someone because it doesn't come across like that to me. What it comes across like that is boredom.
Yeah,
boredom. I'm like,
okay.
I'm not. Just doesn't light me up.
Right.
But it doesn't. I don't notice that part. I notice that I'm interested in other things.
Okay.
And I find the interest, and I'm like, no. Take a second.
Right.
You're actually just bored with what you're doing. You've lost. We're kind of chasing that something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the dopamine.
Now, hold on for a second, right? Because there is an aspect of dopamine with it, for sure.
And Twitter loves the word dopamine, so I just have to.
If you say the word dopamine, you instantly just get a lot of likes. Yeah, it's true. That's actually true. Yeah, I think I actually want to ask you a question. If you had to, for somebody who is like just starting on their journey of, I'm at place A. I know that place B is a possibility. I am either moderately open to place B or kind of like bitter or feeling like it's probably not a possibility, semi-open towards it. What if you were to give maybe two pieces of practical, either a practice or a like an insight or a word that was helpful to you, to move them to a place where they could engage with place B as a real possibility?
Yeah. So I would first look at what I'm obviously interested in it, right? There's some interest towards it. And there's like this little voice, this calling, that's our intuition, right? It's usually so covered up by junk, by old patterns, by old conditioning, by what somebody thinks we should do, by who the world has told us to be, right?
Yeah.
That it just gets drowned out. It's always there, but it's like, so that little voice, that inclination of like, there's two different kinds of wants, right? This is a long-winded way of saying, I want to go into it a little bit deeper. Let's get some context. So there's two different kinds of wants. There's one, which is like egoic want, or like control, personal will-based want, I would call it, where it's like, I want this thing, and if I don't get it, I'm going to be upset. Right. I'm going to be unfulfilled. I'm going to feel like I can't enjoy the moment. Like I can't enjoy myself until I get to it.
Yeah.
Which Naval has a great quote about this. He's like, desire is a contract you make with yourself to be unhappy until you do what you want. Right? So it's like, and I think, right? So it's like,
so accurate.
But the key is like to be happy and enjoy the process. Right. So then the other aspect, the other type of want is what you're just talking about.
Yeah.
I see this possibility. It's interesting. It naturally sparks interest. So now I have to figure out what's in the way. Number one, what's the main thing that's in the way? For me and for a lot of people, it's usually something to the tune of like the people we're hanging out with, right? Drugs and alcohol, too much food, TV, all these addictions.
Yep.
Right. So that's one side of the coin that I would tell people, what's in the way? This is what I like to look at with my clients.
Yep.
Is like, what are the one or two things that are like that you know are in the way, but that you desperately don't want to admit. You desperately don't want to know.
You're just talking about
Yeah.
Yes.
And so that's one. What are those two things? Identifying them and then figuring out how to release that emotional connection and attachment to it. And by the way, everybody, I have done this a lot, but I'm still working on things. I'm still like my Coke Zeros sometimes. I still, like my coffee in the morning, and those aren't always great for me. Yeah. Number two, the second aspect I recommend is saying, well, what do you really want? You want this thing. Why do you want it? Because there's got to be two different kinds of motivation. There's two different kinds. There's toward and away from motivation.
Yep.
So there's like, I need to get away from these things that are holding me back because I know it's not working anymore. I'm discontent. And then there's toward motivation, which is like, I want this thing and it's giving me a sense of wonder, sense of curiosity and interest naturally. But like, what is blocking me from feeling that more intensely? And what does it mean for my life and for the people around me when I get that thing?
That's
right.
I like that last question.
Right.
A lot.
Because it's like people say, okay, I want the $1 million. Okay, that's a number. What does that actually mean?
Right.
That's what's going to motivate you. What does my life look like? What can I do for other people? How can I help? How much free time am I going to have? How am I going to feel once I get there?
Right.
Right.
Man, that's so good. I heard one time somebody, I don't remember exactly the quote, but they said something to the effect of, God tests those he loves by giving them exactly what they ask for. Right. Because the opposite or the other side of that quote is God tests those he loves by giving them what they don't want. Right. Because that's a challenge, right? To test and to grow. But I think there's a test and a challenge with getting what you want as well. Because another way of saying that is a person's true character is often revealed when they are given power, right? When they have something or when they get it, right? Because what you do with that a lot of times is a direct reflection of what values drive you most deeply or something like that. And when you're talking about like wants and away from wants and toward wants or toward why, right? Do you personally have any practices you kind of go through that you particularly enjoy or feel like kind of help you stay on that path better?
Yeah, no, yeah. So there are practices. So like my biggest thing is number one, connecting with spirit, connecting with God. Cause like that is to me, that's flow. That's life force energy.
Yeah.
So like when we're connected to that, we're happy, right? Well, maybe not happy, like, oh my God, bliss all the time,
Right.
but we're content.
Yeah.
And like we're open and we're in a state that is like present. And the only time you can actually do anything is now, obviously. It's like when you're in that state, you get the clear ideas. You get the nudge inside to talk to the person that's in the line at the coffee shop, right? That you wouldn't have talked to had you been more tightened up. So my practices are, a lot of what all the gurus say, get enough sleep, drink it plenty of water. Like those are the primary, like, fundamental ones.
Yep.
Stretch. I work out 4 times a week. I stretch daily. I go on walks. But those, it's really the really fundamental key ones are watching where my mental sphere wants to go.
Yep.
And just paying attention, becoming really self-aware of what works for me and what does not. So like, and everything is going to be, that's always going to be different for different people, right?
Yeah, it is.
So it's like, we were talking about this earlier, like one person may thrive on veganism. Another person thrives on being a carnivore, on eating just meat. And so you have to just really pay attention. And I would say, take note and inventory of what it is that works for you and what doesn't. So to give an example, right now, like I quit drinking and quit smoking weed almost a year ago. I used to have a bad heroin addiction back 12 years ago, and so I've gone through these cycles of dropping stuff over time.
Yeah.
And I've always found that just becoming really, it's utility. It's more of like not this fluffy woo-woo type spirituality or personal development. It's just like very much looking at and seeing clearly what gives me energy, what gives me clarity, that makes me more able to connect and be in harmony with the world, and what takes that away. Right?
1,000.
It's just noticing those things and then removing them when you notice one does and one does not.
Yeah.
Right. And it's easier said than done a lot of times because we can be so locked in to a pattern, but that's where the ego part comes in, right? That's the mind that I was talking about earlier. And I always say on my posts on Twitter, it's like your mind lies to you and it's constantly trying to hook you. And this is the ruminating mind. This is the part of mind that you could call the foe, the villain in life, which you need it or else you wouldn't grow. If there was no villain, the superhero wouldn't have nothing to do. They'd just sit there and twiddle their thumbs and,
Oh, interesting.
you know, so you need it in a way, but also like you want to be able to shorten the gap, the time gap between when it hooks you and when you are able to overcome it or move through it or allow it to move through your system. Right. And there are practices to do that. There's meditation, there's breathing, there's literally like service work, calling a friend, talking to people. I have a whole list on my phone.
Yeah.
Well, that I use for my client going to work out. For me, it's playing guitar and singing. Just anything to get me present centered, anything to get me embodied in the now, and give some distance from my mind. Right, internally, my awareness literally unhook my awareness from the mentosphere, to where it's farther away, because then it's less. It doesn't touch you as much. It's like if you think of you're being on a mountain top, right? You see the city below, and that's your mind below. You're ruminating like bitchy, whiny mind that wants you to do what it wants. It wants you to be lazy. It wants to tell you things are impossible. It wants to tell you that you'll never work out with the girl you're gonna go talk to, or whatever it is. Doesn't exactly. But it's when it's further away and you have that wider perspective, that 30,000-foot view, then you're able to just be more clear about what you choose to pay attention to. Versus like when you're down in the city, down in the muck, in the traffic with people all around, it's just so loud.
Yeah.
And it hooks you much more easily because it seems so much more real. And it's harder to choose which thought to pay attention to. So that's how I see it, like as an analogy.
It's beautiful. There's a piece in there that I really resonate with, which is becoming observant of yourself. And just, if you want to grow spiritually, the fastest way I can think of to encounter your deep-rooted wound or trauma is just say no to yourself about something you like.
Right.
Just for a little bit. Right. Fasting is a really fun one. It's so, the second you decide to fast, you feel hungry.
Right. I know what's coming. It's all created in the mind.
It's amazing how fast. And I know, because I know how people respond when they ask, tell me about fasting. And I'll be like, I'm on day 7. And you see in the eyes, it's like, like, what would that mean for me? I'm hungry after 2 hours. Right. And it's like a lot of things with fasting, it's like for one thing, you build it up. It's a skill. But for another thing, you learn progressively to sit with discomfort and just watch it and just see it. Just watch it for what it is. I'm hungry. That's it. Right. It's uncomfortable. I don't like it.
Yeah. Ask who's hungry.
Yeah, that's a good one. Who's hungry? Michael Singer, too. He'd go, how do you know?
Yeah.
How do you know? I love that. Yeah. And so when you sit and you slow down, so like, for example, like slowing down a little bit in the form of, it doesn't mean necessarily physically slowing down. It just means slowing down as far as what you're aware of. Instead of going pinging out there, just pay attention to what's happening inside, right? So for example, in cognitive behavioral therapy, they have ways of addressing persistent negative thoughts.
Right.
Thoughts that just come up automatically. A good one that I talked with several clients about is like, you walk into a room, there's people, they look at you, they whisper, and then they start laughing. What are you thinking right now? They're laughing at me. Every person
has like a meditation to do or something.
Yeah, sure. Every person who I talk to who imagines that scenario, what are you thinking? They're laughing at the way I look, or they're laughing at something about me. We're like, okay, let's unpack that for a second. You just walked in the room.
They don't even know you.
They don't know you. Maybe they do. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. The point is, when you get observant with yourself, you think, now why do I think that? Is that actually a good thought? Mm-hmm. And that's where the responsibility piece comes in, is that when you can slow down and become observant with yourself, you look at all of the thoughts you're having. Oh, I want this. It's like, well, why do you want that? How do you know you want that? What is it producing for you? So for example, let's say cigarettes, right? I want a cigarette. And most of the time, the way we operate is we get the desire, and either it's like, I can't do it, or I'm going to go do it, right? Right. Think about it for a second. I want a cigarette. Okay. Why? probably because I smoke, right? Or something.
Right.
Because I'm a smoker. I smoke every day. Okay. Well, how do you know you want a cigarette? Well, I have this kind of aching, gnawing kind of itch, like this itch I can't get at. And the only way I can get at it is with a cigarette. And then you get into that farther and it's like, where's that sensation coming from? And you realize you're like, I'm being run by a program that I haven't brought consciousness to, haven't made myself aware of, and it is running the show.
Yes.
And that's what an addiction is, right?
Yes.
An addiction, it owns you.
Yeah.
And we're addicted. Cigarettes are so nice in this fashion because they're so easy to identify, because we are addicted to so many things that are so much more slippery than cigarettes are obvious, right? It's like a thing.
Yeah.
It's a physical thing. What if it's a mental pattern that you're addicted to? How do you break that one down, right?
Ultimately that's what we are addicted to. The outer manifestation is just an addiction to a mental pattern.
Exactly.
It's addiction to thought. It's thinking, it means I think my thoughts are actually real.
Ooh, talk about that.
It's like, I think they're actually true, right? So it's like, okay.
Yeah, break it down.
What is truth? What is it? Just take an argument, for example.
Sure.
Take it's something we don't agree on something.
Sure.
Right?
Coke Zero sucks.
Yeah, Coke Zero sucks. I think Coke Zero is the best.
I think it's not delicious.
It's my most favorite drink ever, and you're wrong. Not only, here's what the mind does. Not only are you wrong, but you're bad. You're not a good person because you don't like Coke Zero, right? And so what does it actually mean that we don't agree? It just means we disagree. Without the thought coming in and saying, because we disagree, it means this. That the truth is we disagree. The belief, the lie, is that you are somehow less of a person, you're somehow wrong and bad, and because you don't agree with me, because there's a conflict between your thoughts and my thoughts.
So you're like picking apart, you're not picking, but you're kind of identifying the difference between the action, the thought, and then the belief behind. Is that right?
The action, the thought, the belief, yes. So belief is just thought that's binded to emotion, right? So like we have, on average, scientifically speaking, like 70 to 90,000 or something like that thoughts a day, close to them, unconscious. And like, think about how much thought runs through your mind that you don't grasp onto, that you don't like take seriously, that doesn't cause any problem. It just floats right through your system. But there's a few, your little buttons, your stuff, as Michael Singer would say.
Yeah, it hits your stuff.
It hits your stuff. Yeah. That you're very defensive about, because there's a sense of self built around it. There's a sense of this is me, of this is true. And if this isn't true, then I lose a piece of me.
Ooh,
right?
That's
this is
interesting. Good friend.
Right, because so we take on a persona over our life. And this is what I mean by breaking down, speaking to my clients in a way that is like, you can't hear your intuition, which is just straight truth, which is just follow me, trust, it's faith. You can't hear that because you have all of this personhood in the way, all of this thought, layers and layers of thought and junk that have been stacked on top of what's coming out in the moment, what's coming out in presence. That's just natural. That's going to come out in the sense of just what is innate to you, right? Because like when I say there's a personhood stuck in there, I just mean that there's layers of old conditioning, old patterns, things we've been taught, and as we believe, things we have emotional connection to, that are all past built. They're all built on the past, right? There's none of it that actually has anything to do with right now.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Ever.
Yeah.
Like, I like to use the idea of, or the analogy of, like, imagine you woke up tomorrow and you didn't know who you were. Imagine you woke up tomorrow and you were, what's the word for it?
Amnesia.
Yeah, amnesia. Like you still have perception. You'd still have consciousness. You'd still be able to see this microphone. You'd still be able to maybe even have a conversation, but you don't know who your personal self is. I don't know my name. I don't know where I came from. I don't know what my parents' names are. Who would you be then? So that's kind of from what I read. It's like you're still here. So like all that stuff is untrue because it's story.
Yeah.
It's story, right?
That's very interesting.
And we take story, which is past, and we come in here and we paste it on now. instead of just enjoying now, right? And so to take it back full circle, essentially the whole belief pattern, belief, thought, action, it's like belief is just this just old theory. It's an old idea of who you are, which once you become conscious and become self-aware, it's not that belief is bad or wrong.
Right.
It's just that you learn to see it as not true, but that you can use it to create.
That's it, dude.
Right?
It's fascinating you said the belief piece too, because I worked in skilled nursing for a while, skilled nursing facility, which is where people go end of life care for the last 5 or 10 years of their life when they need more help than their family can give them. Right.
Yeah.
And there was one woman who I worked with, and she was very, very opinionated, very sweet, but also fierce. Right. And like, you can't tell her what's up. Like she runs the deal, which you have to love because Anyways, and she weighed all of 80 pounds too, so that helps. Yeah, the best. Anyways, she was so sweet, but she grew up in I believe it was in just the immediate aftermath of the Great Depression, and her family was in a place that was hit really hard, right? And so when she was growing up, it was save everything, like this extreme, really hardship-based frugality with everything, right? Save your food, save money, do not waste anything because you don't know if you'll get more of it, right?
Right.
So fast forward, now we're in a skilled nursing facility. This is years later, right? And she, every meal, would grab sugar packets and salt packets and would carry them and stash them in a bra, of course, right? And bring them back with you or with her. And
she's like a hoarder.
Yeah. And she was putting them in this drawer. And she had a drawer, thousands of salt, pepper, sugar, these little packets, ketchup, right? And she would, every meal would take some. And there was something about it that I always, it just is such a clear image of, yes, it is true that you lived in a time where food was so scarce and it just went so deep into your psyche that food is scarce because it helped you survive in that time. Also, it is not that time.
Right.
And that's the thing that I feel like with when I'm working with clients who have these belief systems, right, who have this past trauma-based, wound-based, true encounter, right? If you have, for example, a relationship that hurt you or wounded you, and you extrapolate and generalize that to all men or all women are blank, right?
Right.
You've done the same thing. Mm-hmm. And so then you approach the meal with this scarcity of crumbs and pennies. I need all of mine. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to hurt me and I know it. Right. And then you approach it and then you end up making that true.
Right.
And that's the weirdest thing, right, which fulfills it again. Right. And that goes back to the piece about observation. It's like, unless you take the time to really just sit and watch and be like, what is this person doing? Meaning, what am I doing?
Right.
You'll never
character doing.
What is this character doing? That's a super great way to say it.
Right. Because it's like, then you take the third person view.
Yeah.
And you just start to see, okay, when I act this way, when I think this way, it seems to keep calling to me the same situations. And until you start putting those pieces together, I love that analogy or that story, because like life is neutral. Like when I think of unconditional love, that's what I think it actually means. It's not some like fluffy, flowery, oh, I love you. It's more of just like, you have choice. You have free will, but you don't have free will when you're caught in pattern, once you're caught in conditioning.
That's it.
Right? But once you become aware, you step out of it, then you have choice. So the way I like to think about it, kind of like the mountain analogy, it's like when you're caught in pattern, when you're caught in mind, like old past mind or like future tripping mind, which is really just past mind projecting what they think future will be because of
future tripping.
Yes, which is all completely illusion. Because the only thing that's here is this. It's literally as simple as it's that which cannot be simpler. Yeah. That's why we miss it. But it's like, so hey bird, the bird agrees. So I think of it like this: hands here, like Ricky Bobby. You know, I don't know what to see with my hands. Yeah, Bird loves it too. Yeah. And so hand here, it's like thought is here when you're hooked into it.
Yeah.
And you can't see. It's blinding you. But the more awareness you get, space, and you see your fingers. Oh, these are all individual thoughts. Now I can choose which figure do I want to wiggle?
Yeah.
Which which one do I want to like take part in? Which one do I want to? And then you go back to big view and you're like, and you can choose again. You can always decide again. Another Alan Watts quote.
Yeah.
You're under no obligation to be the person you were 5 minutes ago.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Right.
Talk about that one. What does that mean to you?
To me, that means that like we are constantly in the state of either two choices. We're in a state of like fully immersing ourselves in the moment and actually living from a place of intuition and from faith and inspiration, which is like allowing things to come to us, allowing life force, God, spirit, whatever you want to call it, to move through us, and taking that part of the river, or we're swimming against it, or we're being the same person that we were 5 minutes ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And we're taking that and we're using that as a future projection and putting it on right now. We're acting a certain way now because of our experience prior. And so this is literally the key to everything. This is the key to like gaining what real control over your life. I don't mean control like in the sense of, oh, I need to control this or I'm going to like force this. It's control in the sense of seeing what's natural to you, seeing what's authentic to you, being able to actually hear it, and then stepping into that purpose. And then continually over and over and making that choice, just like you were mentioning earlier about just saying no to the things that you know you shouldn't do, that like even though you may for instant gratification based on your old conditioning want to do, saying no, because you build that muscle, right? You build the muscle of no longer being reactive and being proactive and saying what's coming through. And one of my favorite teachers, and that son is just really, he's just following me. One of my favorite teachers, his name is Jed McKenna. Yeah, he's actually a pseudonym for, I think, got it from Terrence McKenna.
Oh, of course.
Sentence. But he likes to say, when I don't know what to do, I do nothing until the right answer comes. Because the right answer, if I'm forcing something, it means I'm caught in the mind. So, and then the answer will come and it resounds as like a yes, like a fuck yes.
Yeah.
It's like it rings true. It's like it feels good. It feels open.
Yeah.
And the forcing mind wants to be like, I have to figure this out or else I'm going to die or else I'm going to whatever, fill in the blank. Right.
Now that's an interesting one right there. That's an interesting one. I think about when, in practical terms, because one of the things I like about Michael Singer is he always loops it right back into the day-to-day, the practical, because so let's say you have a decision to make that actually has a time constraint. How do you go about approaching that when you feel that I'm not sure what to do and let's say you've got 10 minutes, right? What would you do? You know what I mean? It's hard because I can't think of a perfect metaphor, but because I agree with you. And then also I know that so much of our lives is commanded just by its nature, by time, you know what I mean? Right. Yeah.
I would say usually if I have 10 minutes to do something, and I have to make that decision right now, like, well, doing nothing is a decision, right? So stepping back from it. First, I would always connect to the breath. I would always connect, get myself back here, and then be like, just ask. Literally not even to answer, not even expecting an answer. Just be like, what's the correct answer?
Yeah.
Not the correct, what's the most useful answer?
Oh, wow.
Based on where I say I'm trying to go, based on what direction I want to go, there's a million different answers. If I'm trying to drive to New York, what's the most useful way to go to New York? It's definitely not to drive towards LA, right? And then like, what is the most useful answer that creates harmony between myself and the outside world too?
Yeah.
So that's how I would answer that. And just also knowing that like, it's very rare in life that a single decision you're going to make is going to transform your entire, you know what I mean? It's going to like be like the clutch, the decision, right? Yeah. And if it is the decision, usually you're in a situation where you're like in danger with your life. Like, which in that case, like, adrenaline takes over,
Yeah.
nature takes over, you just make a
It's
decision.
almost reflex.
Right. It's right. It's reflexive. Is it's like life or death. But most decisions are not life or death. You know, if you make the quote unquote wrong decision, you learn what not to do next time. It could be a big mistake. You could lose a lot of money. You could lose a loved one. But like the interesting thing though is you can't screw it up.
Talk about that.
Well, because whatever decision you make is a decision you make. And therefore you're supposed to apparently make that decision. Because it's what happened. You always know what's supposed to be happening because it's what's happening. And that's part of coming into congruence with presence, right? And so you know that doesn't mean it's not good. That doesn't mean it's going to be pleasant. Doesn't mean it's not going to be challenging or painful. Doesn't mean doesn't mean any of those things. It just means, okay, I'm going to make the best decision that I think I can make that feels most aligned with where I'm trying to go and let the chips fall within it. Because then if you make, it's like what I've discovered is if I make a decision and then I'm like, oh, it's just not the right decision.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to then from that point on, I'm not centered in the moment. I'm not able to make clear decisions because I'm too busy worried about how it's going to affect the future, which isn't happening right here. Which isn't going right. The best way to affect the future is being very clear about what I'm doing.
Oh, this is like, I have many thoughts about this.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. I feel there's a practical sense of me that that wants to add context because I do know that I have a body.
Please.
I have a body. You know what I mean?
Please add. Yeah.
So for example, like I have always painted this as it could be a rebuttal, but it's more of just a, oh, so what about this?
Yeah. Don't disagree with me.
Oh dear.
You're going to be a bad person.
But there's like, so for example, one person was like, I always choose nonviolence. And I was like, really? Because I saw how
love the absolute.
Did you see how you brutalized that piece of kale?
Yeah.
Crushing it with your exposed bones and you're masticating it and crushing it, extracting the nutrients. It's horribly violent. What you did to that lettuce.
Right.
But for some reason that doesn't matter. Right.
No.
But it's funny because it's like, okay, so nonviolence, you mean in this parameter, right? And that's
within context.
Within this specific context, because really the act of eating is taking something and allowing it to become your new body, right? Which is in some ways, from different lenses, is not or is a violent act, right?
Yeah.
Or a system-serving act.
Matter of degree.
Totally, 100%. And so with the feeling of getting behind and finding peace and not really thinking too much about the future, there's a piece of me that wants to ask for further context, right? So like, for example, I would like outcome B. Outcome B is not here right now, so therefore I have to at least consider the future, of course. So, hey, how do you balance that with that present focus, but also you do look up at the future? So, what is that? Of course,
yeah. So personally, the way I am personally hooked up, just my personality, what came from the factory, is that I'm not, at least at this point in my life, and really a lot of my life, I'm not extremely future oriented. Like I am to a degree. There's things I want, there's visions I get, there's things I want to move towards and do, of course. So it's like the more self-aware I've become, the more it's become less either or. It's both and.
Sure.
So it's like, yes, I have an aim. Right. I know the general direction I'm moving. This is where I want to end up. And this is something that is actually kind of like stuck in my craw a little bit. It's been a point of confusion. And I know a little bit for me in the past, not as much anymore, because I've taken on this context or this like just acceptance of contrast with it.
Yeah.
So it's like, on the one hand, yes, I'm trying to move in this direction and I'm going to do that.
Right.
But the more I think about there, the less I'm here focused and able to actually get there faster. So I'm going to close the gap between where I'm at and just say the $1 million that I'm trying to make for whatever reason. I'm going to close that gap much faster if I'm fully focused in the moment, doing the next step, just taking the very next step in that direction.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the
Keeping in mind where I want to go. But yeah.
Right.
So it's both.
It is both.
Right.
Yeah. So going back to your the mountain idea or the hiking, it's like if you're trying to get to a mountaintop, but you can't not look at the present, but you also can't not look at. You got to look up every now and then to make sure.
Right.
I'm going.
But you don't want to walk off a cliff either.
You don't want to walk off a cliff. That's the thing, and I think that's the balance. Is it's just practical. It's like there are tendencies we have, kind of like you mentioned, like we're kind of predisposed with, but our tendency generally, and this is just kind of observing human nature in general, which is not always accurate, but this is just for the sake of this statement.
S's and G's, shits and giggles.
For shits and giggles. That's good. Most people's, Osho said this, the work we have is then letting go because we have no problem holding on.
Oh, no.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what it is.
I have a huge problem holding on. It's the whole problem.
Yeah. We have no issue learning how to hold on. Let's say so, yeah. And I think, let's put it this way. Do you feel like people are too on the horizon or too worried about the present? Which one do you think that we're caught in?
I think if you're fully in the present, you're not worried.
That's talking about
like if you're worried in the present, it's because you're stuck in the future in your mind. Or in the past. Right? Because there's no problem now. It's the mind that causes problem. It's the mind that causes worry. It's the mind that says I should be there instead of here. It's the mind that says I should have done this instead of that. Instead of what I did do. So like worry always comes from this image and belief in the mind.
Okay.
It's a thought connects to an emotion and it causes worry. It causes constriction. It causes tightness, which not counterintuitive, it makes perfect sense. Like when you're tight, you have a very narrow focus. We have this very like narrow idea of what we think is true versus like, okay, well, what's one of my favorite questions that I got from my NLP coach, shout out William Lamb at Upgrade NLP or Upgrade. It's just called Upgrade. Anyways, one of his favorite questions that I always stuck with me was, what's not the problem?
It's a great question.
Well, the problem is that I'm thinking there's a problem and I'm thinking something needs to be different than it is. So what's not the problem? Literally everything else. The entire universe is not the problem outside of this one little tiny minuscule sliver of thought that I'm focused on.
That little thing we drew earlier.
The tiny thing that broke. It's like, no, and it actually led to an even better set.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so that's what I don't remember what the original question was.
Well, just the balancing of because anytime I'm given an articulated position, my knee jerk little boy wants to be like, how can we? Is it a puzzle? What's the way that that's not true? It seems true, but what is the way that it's not true? Right. And so there's instances where I'm like, well, it does seem like there would be a time when it's right to be feeling worry, and that you shouldn't judge yourself for this, or that it's right to be feeling afraid.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead. Like disturbed is not necessarily bad.
No.
Let's put it that way.
Well, this is another misconception.
Sure.
Like that there's such thing as right or wrong or good or bad. It's like there's just what is true and what is not true in the terms of, in the context of what's useful and what is not. Right. Okay. So like to call, say we call someone who commits violence unwarranted on another person. We call them bad. Call them a bad person. Right. What they actually are, if you look at it from like just a purely objective standpoint, is they're a confused person, and they're a person who is creating disharmony. They're a person who has said, I am more important than the whole, and therefore I'm going to do what I want despite how badly it hurts everything else around me. Right? How negatively it impacts, or just like negative and positive, right? Sure. Versus good or bad, because good and bad, right and wrong, that's like a judgment of the mind versus just looking at it clearly, which is like, well, if I say something terrible to you, that's kind of like not going to uplift you. It's going to tear you down, most likely, right? But if I say something super positive and make a great suggestion and compliment you, that's going to lift you up. That's harmony. That creates a cohesiveness between us versus like a distance or like a disconnect.
And tracking.
Right?
Yeah.
So like, yeah.
Yeah. I feel, speaking of paradoxes, I feel that right and wrong is good and bad is obviously true. And I feel that good and bad is also obviously not an accurate way to describe the world.
Right.
Meaning both, because, for example, if you were to break it down in terms of positive or negative, I'm like, according to who, according to when, according to what,
Yes.
which is good or bad, right?
Right.
This is the same. And some
Compared to what?
Hey, compared to what?
Yeah.
I love that one, dude. Oh, what's that from? That's from
Oh, that's I get that from the NLP. Another shout out to William Lamb. Yeah. Compared to what? It's like, this is really expensive. Well, compared to what? Compared to what?
That's a great question.
Great sales question. Or when somebody like tries to object about your price.
Yeah.
Oh, it's, what does it cost you if you don't take the course?
It's a really good way to, it is actually basically what you're asking is let's think harder before you come to a conclusion.
Right.
Yeah. Because I feel as though the same as so many things are locally true because we are localized.
Mm-hmm.
I am a localized collection of cells, right? I happen to walk around. Like this is kind of the system through which I operate with the world. And so when we talk about harmony, disharmony, present, good or bad, all of those things are mediated through a we'll call it system, but I think being is probably the best way to say it. Is a filter? Yeah, which is basically like when I think of a being, I think of essentially like in some ways the middle of the hourglass. Mm-hmm. So much information is coming through, it goes through this little tiny thing and it goes through, right? It passes through in some regard. But there's also an experience, a lived experience. And so, yeah, I need to think harder on that question of the because this is a huge question of philosophy of the objective versus subjective. This is what we're talking about, right? This is the objective, good or bad. Is there a bedrock of morality that we're basing our lives on, or is it based solely on the subjective experience? And that's one that I think might be just one of the paradoxes, right? Or real humming paradoxes.
Or that is it all just subjective?
Well, that's how one of the argument. Yeah.
Right. It is. And so like there's this idea in Zen, which is basically they sell enlightenment just as like it's simple. It's not you're gonna feel this way. It's not, never ending bliss or never have another problem. It's just sold as like seeing things the way they are. Right. And one of my favorite teachers, Adyashanti Lex, lectured on this once. He's like, it just means seeing things the way they are. It just means seeing things the way they just clear vision instead of with the filters that we have on because of our past conditioning. Right? It's seeing things just as the truth of it. Okay, so like I throw a rock or somebody throws a rock and hits me in the head. It's painful. Does it mean it's good or bad? Or does it mean it's just painful and ouch and I don't want that to happen again because I prefer pleasure or feeling okay to
just feeling not pain.
Right. Exactly. Not pain. Right. That is pleasure in contrast to pain.
Totally. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. But it's just that's all it's when the mind drops, when judgment completely drops, and then you're in that flow state, and there's something else comes online as far as your desires. Like I was talking about earlier, it's more of a whimsical, like, oh, that'd be kind of cool. Like that naturally interests me.
Yeah.
And that's the shit you should go after. Shouldn't, that's another weird contextual thing, but
that's a hard one.
Yeah. Should just meaning like there is no shouldn't either. There's only just, like I said, we're talking about straight truth. There's just like what attracts me, what repulses me, what causes harmony, what causes disharmony, what lifts myself and others up, a win-win, versus what lifts myself up and pushes others away and causes others to lose, which is a zero-sum game, which is versus a positive-sum game, which is we both can win. Everybody can win. And so the sun is really just,
I know it's getting at.
There's sun's getting me. There's flies like landing on me. Yeah, I think it's I think it's the devil trying to stop us from having this conversation just because it's so.
We were talking about whether challenge is God testing my persistence or is he shutting a door? No, that's a question.
You know,
Well, I said, yeah, ask you. What do you think?
is he testing my persistence or shutting a door? I think anytime a certain pattern continues to come up continually, it's meant to be looked at just more closely and be like, okay, until I resolve this pattern, it's going to keep coming up.
Yeah.
And so what does it mean? This is another series of questions that I was taught in NLP, which is like, define the problem. What is the actual problem? What keeps happening?
Yeah.
And the second question is, how did I create this? Which another way, a spiritual way to look at it is like, how am I unenlightening myself? How am I taking clarity in this situation and placing this little sliver of mind in front of it and causing problem?
Yeah.
Right? Causing emotional turmoil. Right? And then what do I need to learn from this situation, this upswelling of emotion inside of me in order to release it? Not what am I supposed to learn generally, like, because you could say I can learn a million things. Like, what needs to be known so I can let go of X, let go of this emotional patterning? And then, fourth question, what do I want instead? What's calling me? Most people think in negations. I think in terms of like, oh, I hope I don't get sick. Versus like,
it's hard not to. It's hard not to.
That notion right there. Is it has to be hard?
I don't die for being too happy.
Well, right.
I could die for being.
You could continually think like, I just want to be safe and well. I want to feel good, and I want to feel content and at peace. There's sometimes that you won't, but that doesn't like get you any closer to like, you know what I mean? Like thinking, I hope I don't get sick, and like ruminating on it, causing the
like that,
causing the. I mean, we do it all the time.
We really do.
We can. we are. I do it every day. You know, I'm by no means like, hope nobody misunderstands because I'm well versed on this stuff.
Yeah,
but I don't get caught by it.
No.
I do like constantly.
Yeah.
It's just I'd say the difference is I'm good at getting out of it.
You just recognize it
and you see it. Yeah, I see it and I practice, and it still hooks me sometimes. Sometimes bad, sometimes like really challengingly. But
there's an image that I heard. And have you seen the movie? I think it's called The Biggest Little Farm. Never get it. Oh, it's a great film. It's about a little piece of land that I think it's in California that this couple decides to develop. And anyways, they're trying to develop it in a way that's in harmony with nature. And this guru that they're talking to ends up telling them this metaphor, which it hit me as instantly like, I just really feel like that's true.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that when done well, this should feel like surfing. Okay. And the point is, with surfing, there's just a little bit that you can do. The wave is way bigger than you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can kind of move along it. You can move your feet. You can move your body in balance, right?
Yeah.
But really, your main job is to just ride the wave, right?
Yes.
And I think that's a piece that like learning to. Because what are you going to flatten it? You're going to get on iron and flatten the water. Like what do you really have no choice but to ride the waves. And I think with that too, if I look like in terms of, this is all going back to that good and bad, subjective, objective thing. I think the place where I come to is the same as I look at the beautiful red rocks and the beautiful green tree. And there is an articulate argument that shows that those are not different. But experience, they are different.
Right.
Paradox, right? Because there is an arbitrary sense of the spectrum of color, which is not really definable. How would you define it? Who would define everybody, whatever. But when I experience it, I look and I see the juniper berries are a little blue. The leaves are green. The ground is red, right?
Yes.
And when I think in terms of good and bad, I think in those terms. I think generally speaking, there is an argument to break down almost to dissolve apart the constituent elements of any argument, but that lived experience-wise, I think there's just a natural state where I'm okay calling things good or bad.
Yeah.
I'm just very cognizant of it. And I think that's a very important piece.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That's the difference.
Yeah.
It's like knowing, like good and bad. You can call it good. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it,
Go red and green.
yeah, you can call it Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. But it doesn't take away the cause and effect, right? The cause and effect, that's what I mean by truth. It's just what is. It's just when I do this, this happens. When I do this, this happens. And one of them we call good, one of them we call bad. One of them we call, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, another we can call Dasher and Donner, for all I care, right? It doesn't matter. Like that's part of what you were just saying. Like that's the difference of knowing how to use belief, knowing fully well that it's belief, knowing that it's not actually true. It's just a label, right? And knowing how to use it to like direct the direction that we want to go, and tap into that like flow state.
Good. Tapping in, that's a really good way to say it.
Yeah.
Like that.
And getting on the surfboard.
Yeah. I love that image. I think it's perfectly accurate. It really is. I think it's
Yeah. Because there's like a sliver of it that you can ride in.
You're responsible for
Right.
the things that help you keep going on it.
Yes.
That's it. Like, and you can bail at any time.
Yeah.
I mean, you could, there's, I guess, and well, the right and wrong is basically in terms of can you keep the game going is right. And wrong would be you stop the game.
Right.
I think that's what it comes.
Right. You cause disharmony. You gum up the system. You get out of flow.
Out of flow, dude.
Yes. You're causing like one of my, again, another plug to Adyashanti. You probably will never watch this, but I never know. I actually asked him.
Never know.
Yeah, you never know. I actually asked him one time at a retreat that I went to because I was like, I'm thinking about doing this stuff, like teaching. He's like,
I love it when teachers say that.
Give it a try.
I love that.
Yeah, he's like, see how it goes. Yeah, and he's one of the most like. There's very few people I would say are what I would consider like enlightened. Yeah, he's one of them. Like, there's very few I've ever met or come across, listened to. I'm like, this person is like really awake.
Yeah,
and he's one of them. But where was I going with this? What was I saying?
We were talking about the surfboard. Talking about being in the flow.
Yes. So he talks about he did this wonderful talk on the law of attraction. Yeah, and how it relates to enlightenment. And he's like it's just truth and untruth. He's like it's cause and effect. So it's like there's one state of being, which is flow, which you move with. You pay attention to the wonder aspect. You pay attention to where the currents inside of you are moving, and that's harmony. That's like going to lead you to the things that you're naturally put here to do, your purpose, the things that like just naturally come to you is like, oh yes, wonderful. Not something that was conditioned into you that we think we should want because other people tell us we should want it, right? And then there's the aspect of like not listening to that flow, not listening to that inner voice, and gumming up the whole system.
Right.
He's like, neither of it's wrong. It's not wrong or good or bad or right or wrong. I mean, you can't screw it up. Was his like another one of his plights? Like you can't screw it up. You can just slow it up. You can just gum it up.
Oh, that's a quote right there. You can't screw it up. You can only slow it up.
Right. He's like his analogy is like you can take something that it's like a Ferrari and handles great and turn it into like something like a Geo Metro. A Yugo, something that hardly barely handles at all. By getting caught in just the old conditioned patterns of that aren't you, but essentially are the false you.
Yeah.
And that's why they're can be so difficult to let go of, because we're so used to this unnatural sense of self that it starts to feel natural.
Yeah.
Right. But it's not natural. You realize it's not natural because when it's gone, like if you've ever had an awakening experience or some sort of old belief that you had that was suddenly gone, that you didn't believe anymore. You're like, how did I ever believe that? But when you're believing it, you're certain, right?
Yeah.
And it's like almost like losing a piece of yourself because it's a piece of your persona that sloughed off.
Yeah. Yeah. Letting go of that being lost to self is it can be a hard work. It's not necessarily hard, but a lot of times we experience it as challenge.
Yeah. It gets easier. I would argue.
I think so too.
As you get more conscious about doing it.
Yeah.
So
that's great.
How long have we been going? I think Shit, we've probably been going
Dude,
45 minutes.
I think so.
And you want to end it?
Great conversation.
Yeah, that was great. That was beautiful.
Yeah.
So I do want to talk a little bit, just totally switching gears.
Yeah. Yeah.
About just about Twitter and how we met, and like,
Absolutely.
we want to go into that just a little bit.
Sure. Talking about
Yeah, we kind of touched on it a little bit in the beginning.
how we met on Twitter.
Total 180s,
But
but not really, because it connects to this is life. This is things.
let's talk about we met on Twitter.
Because like beginning when I first got on.
When were you first on Twitter? I feel like maybe November.
It was really December 2022.
December.
Maybe it's late November. Yeah, it was like early December, probably like
Probably January is when I first met.
Yeah, it would have been like probably a month then. It sounds about right. Yeah,
Yeah.
No, it's just it's crazy how much turmoil I've had over switching into this whole Twitter thing.
Oh yeah.
Going from like a safe real estate career where I'm making a bunch of money to like this is my ego, my past self coming up and being like, this is impossible. You're not like you're going to go from making all this money doing something that you're like not you don't hate. It gives you a lot of free time, stepping into your passion. Like you sure you want to do this?
Yeah.
Where there's nothing guaranteed.
Yeah.
Like the money isn't guaranteed. That's what my mind tells me. But my intuition just like, bro, just stop listening. Just keep taking the next step. And it's worked out.
Mhm.
In 6 months, I've met you. I've met Legacy Builder. Shout out to Legacy. I just met Dan Coe the other night. I've met and hung out with Tyler Tott, Rob Smith, all of these guys. Like John, Quit Porn Specialist. Shout out to you.
Yeah.
He does business with it.
Dude, just a list of stuff right there.
Yeah, just like all these people who I didn't know 6 months ago that I have a community with.
Yeah.
And a connection with. It's been incredible. It's beyond the money aspect. I've made money on there so far, which has been great. But like beyond that, it's just been such a magical like pride and experience. I'm glad I trusted myself and
Oh yeah. Me too.
Yeah, man.
I'm glad you did too.
Yeah. Yeah, or else we wouldn't be here right now having this conversation.
Yeah.
And this feels what I'm truly meant to be doing. Now that I'm doing this podcast with you, thank you, by the way, because this guy is the one who like talked me into doing this.
Yeah, dude.
I wanted to do it, but you're like, dude, you're like, bro, come up to Sedona. We're gonna do this. We'll do it at my Airbnb.
Yep.
And I was just like, maybe I'll hit you up, I'll let you know. And then I woke up yesterday. I was like, fuck this. We're fucking.
We got it.
Yeah, we got to do it.
We got it, dude. You know what's the funniest piece is that when you were coming up, you were like, "Oh, dude, I got to hit up this coffee shop."
Yeah.
Called Synergy, and I'm literally sitting in
Yeah.
Synergy when he texted me, and I was like, "No way!"
Yeah.
I was like, and this is not a tiny town.
No,
like there's
no.
plenty of spaces to be.
It was the coffee shop. Yeah.
Yeah, that was synergistic, is what that was.
It was. That's
No, man. Okay, going back, you said when you were kind of encountering that fear of going off on your own entrepreneurial pursuit right there, I heard somebody say that your salary is the cost that the company pays you to abandon your independent dreams. Heard that?
Yeah.
Now, that's not always true. Sometimes a salary, if it lines up with what you want to do and it provides for your family, that's great. But there are some of you that rings really true.
Right.
And that rang true for me, which was, man, there's so much, there's so much more that I could be encountering. There's so much more I could do, and really engaging with a level of creativity and ownership. And I think the most powerful aspect of Twitter is that if you're on it long enough, saying something from your soul, like you actually mean it, it'll self-select the people that engage with you. You'll just find people who you really engage with.
Yeah.
Right. And it's amazing because it's so idea heavy that you're sharing ideas about, like a lot of stuff I share is like some spirituality stuff, psychology, talking about ways of thinking, mental models, some practical stuff. But then you get people who are like, oh, that's kind of a cool idea. I'm going to share my idea. And you're like, I like that idea.
Yeah.
And then you get to connect like this. It's incredible. It really is.
Yeah. It turns into like a synchronicity.
Yeah. 100%.
And I love that quote. We just said there's another version of it that says something like the two most addicting drugs in the world are heroin and a monthly salary.
Oh yeah. Somebody once called a job a velvet coffin.
Yeah.
And it scared the crap out of me, dude. They were like, "Oh, that job is a velvet coffin," and I was like, "Oh my goodness,
That's very accurate.
terrifying."
That's accurate.
Yeah, that's a terrifying thing. Yeah, but no, I'd encourage anybody. I mean, if you have questions about how to start that process, Cole's definitely a good guy to talk to and to dive in and just really sort out like, how do you even go about connecting with people? How do you go about posting? What do you share? What do you not share? Right? Because it's like there is a balance of it's kind of like a big cocktail party. Would you say?
It is.
Yeah.
I would say LinkedIn's like the business party. Twitter's like the cocktail party after.
Right. Yeah, I find it so much easier to connect with people on Twitter than I do on IG, on Facebook. And Facebook's like, to me, it's like all my parents' friends. It's like the old people community at the show in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And then IG's great. I love IG actually. But so nothing bad about it. But Twitter,
It's the amount of connection on Twitter.
yes.
They're all qualitatively a little different.
Right. Because Twitter's more like spoken word type, like ideas based. And so it's easier to connect on ideas versus just like the like the vanity aspect of photos and like, look at my life, versus yours. And
Red rocks, and it actually looks like a rainstorm over there.
Right.
That's kind of funny, but yeah.
Cool, man. Well, yeah, I really enjoyed this. Is there anything else? Any last words you wanna just light them up with? Give me. You said you're the quote guy. Give me one piece of advice for the audience. Just whatever's coming to your mind. What's one of your favorite quotes?
I heard this quote this morning, actually, so I'll share it. It's, your systems are perfectly designed to give you the results you're getting. So think about that. The current systems are perfectly designed to give you the results you're getting. So if you don't like the results,
yes,
you need to think about your life in terms of the repeated unconscious actions.
Yes.
So all of that stuff just comes to bringing awareness, but also just taking time. I think there's an aspect of just calm, loving observation where you just watch yourself and you just observe, what am I doing? And you'll see all of a sudden you're like, man, I've reached for my phone like 15 times. I'm like, in like a minute? Or like, man, I keep wanting, anything. Like I want to eat, or I want to do something. You'll see all of a sudden you start reaching. Watch your body and watch your mind, what it does when you just sit and observe it, and you'll learn a lot.
Right. Well, at first, like a lot of times you can't stop doing it either. Like you see it, and you keep doing it, and even though you know it's ridiculous.
The worst.
You're right.
Worst, dude.
It reminds me of a quote, that one right there, which just relates, which is a quote my friend Chris Stevenson, another shout out, saw on a bathroom door stall in St. Louis, Missouri. And it said, "You are what you think you are. Or no, you are who you think you are. And whoever you believe yourself to be is what you will ultimately become." Yeah. You are who you think you are, and whoever you believe yourself to be is who and what you will ultimately become. So be careful what you truly believe and learn to remove the old beliefs and replace them with new ones.
Yeah, 100%. That's it, dude.
Yeah. So all right, brother.
Good talking to you.
That was great. Yeah. Hell yeah. Let me know what you think in the comments. Leave a review, like it, share it with your peeps. That would mean so much to me to spread this message and, help nourish other people. That's what this Colemination project, my podcast, is all about. Talk to you soon.